Introducing Oakley Meta Vanguard, the new performance AI glasses designed for athletes. With hands-free capture on an action-ready ultra-wide camera, powerful open-ear speakers, and built-in Meta AI that syncs with your Garmin devices for real-time insights while you train. Take your performance to the next level with Oakley Meta Vanguard. Athletic intelligence is here. Learn more on meta.com.
Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration, and use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome to Howie the Podcast. It's Gav, and you join us for something we sure you haven't done in a little while. We're talking about news, transfer links, all that sort of good stuff. We've not had a game this weekend, so we haven't got as much to talk about in terms of action, which has led us to see what's going on in the wider world of Sunday FC. And of course, well, you know, January's just around the corner. We're chatting about transfers again. And as I was just saying to this particular fella before we came on air, we were doing transfer pods every single day during the summer. So I think this is the start of what's to come, isn't it, Jonny? Hello, mate.
Yeah, hiya. It's a familiar feeling, this, sitting in front of a screen with you lads about to talk about transfers. Hopefully the muscle memory just kicks in and we're straight back at it like we never left.
Yeah. Well, I like transfer season. Why wouldn't you enjoy transfer season when you see the calibre of football that we're being linked with, you know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to getting into this one. Also with us today is Andrew Smithson. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. It's the perfect storm, isn't it? We've got the transfer window just round the corner, and like you say, international break. So I think the newspapers have been starting to dig out a few transfer stories to keep the newspapers filled. And I mean, it was great fun over the summer. So hopefully some of the names we get linked with over the next few weeks are going to be as exciting as that lot.
Yeah, it's not just transfers, by the way. There are a few other bits and pieces, some of the international break updates of how players have got on and so on, and also an interview with Lee Camp, which has grabbed the headlines this week, which should be quite interesting to chat about. But yes, we will start off with transfers, and I will just at this point, Jonny, say that in the summer we were officially linked with about 130 players. I think it was something daft like that, across the entire different names. How many did we sign? 14 players?
14.
Yeah, so the hit rate of the media is not particularly great, is it? But having said that, some of these are names of players that were linked with us in the summer. So there could be a grain of truth in what we're about to chat about. And I guess it kind of feeds off the back of what me and you were chatting about when we did the deep dive into the AFCON, which if anybody hasn't listened to that yet, make sure you do go back and listen to that. Me and Jonny spent a good 2 hours or so chewing over what we can expect from the African Cup of Nations and how Sunderland will deal with it. But off the back of that, it did make me think a little bit about like what do we actually need in January, because it is literally 6 weeks away, and we will be right back into the thick of the funny business of the transfer window. But as I said, some of these names have been linked with us previously, which is why they're so prominent. And I'm going to start off with this one because me and you were chatting about really needing a central midfielder, somebody who can provide not just competition, but maybe even cover for a player like Granit Xhaka, who can do a similar kind of role in the midfield and complement him if we need him to. I mean, Noah Siddiqui has done a fine job. We've got Habib Diarra coming back at some point, but then obviously the spectre of Dan Neil hanging over us, which of course his contract situation isn't going away, is it? So we've got that to consider. But Matteo Guendouzi is a player who previously played for Regis Lebris for Lorient. He's known to him. I think he even did an interview over the summer talking about how Lebris was one of the biggest influences on his career as a young player. Played for Arsenal alongside Granit Xhaka. He now plies his trade for Lazio and is quite an important player at Lazio. But it's not going away, this rumour. As I say, it was there in the summer. And it's the outlet who are reporting this are called Il Messaggero, I think. Messaggero? I don't know. I can't speak Italian. I'll just go with either of those. They are reporting that Sunderland and Aston Villa both made inquiries over Lazio midfielder Matteo Guendouzi during the summer window, and the Serie A club may be forced to revisit their stance in the coming weeks. So that's an interesting one because it just makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? When you think about the links to Lebris, the links to Granit Xhaka, Premier League experience. He's still a good age. He's 26-year-old. Apparently, by all accounts, Lazio are in financial trouble, so they're keen to maybe shed a bit of weight. I know I said before, Jonny, some of these links are going to be like we're not going to see anything from them, but this is one I can genuinely see coming off. I think there's a grain of something in this.
I think there's got to be, hasn't there? Because, like you say, it's not just the fact that it sort of makes sense on a surface level of, as you say, the experience, the links, the pre-existing relationship that already exists with Lebris. That interview that you mentioned that he gave, kind of talking Lebris up, and there are multiple signs that maybe there is something actually there underneath the usual sort of newspaper transfer bluster, which, as you say, we have to take all of this with perhaps more than a grain of salt. But I also think Guendouzi in particular, when we were having that chat on the AFCON pod, he was the name that was in my head as sort of the first option that would immediately spring to mind, because not only is there the sort of the mental side or the character aspect of a signing, which is obviously something that must be incredibly tough for a recruitment team to judge. And we've done a fantastic job of it so far. You've almost got that portion of the scouting report ticked off already by the fact that we've got, Lebris in particular, who already knows him. I think the style of play, you mentioned somebody who needs to be able to compete with and cover Granit Xhaka. And I think Guendouzi is that type of player, certainly more so than I think you would say anyone else that we've currently got. Dan Neil, obviously, as you say, the spectre of Dan Neil hanging over, which I thought was a nice turn of phrase. I like Dan Neil a bit more than your average ghost, but that is a conundrum which will need a resolution one way or another. And as much as we all love Dan Neil, and as much as I'd love to see him sign the contract tomorrow and get a run in the team and turn into a Premier League legend, I think at the moment it doesn't look too likely that all of that's going to happen. So the club are not daft. They'll be looking at this January as an opportunity, obviously, to bring in immediate term cover, but they're not just going to sign somebody for the sake of having a body in. I don't think we've put ourselves in a position now where we've got the luxury of being able to plan for the medium term already. So somebody like a Guendouzi would make sense, because I think caliber-wise, certainly at this moment in time, he's an upgrade on Dan Neil. And without wanting to dig him out, he is the sort of obvious body in the squad where we'd be looking and going, well, you're not starting games, you're not getting on in games much, you're running out of time. That's somewhere that we, unfortunately, it's a cutthroat business, that is where we need to focus. So Guendouzi, makes a lot of sense to me, and I'd be happy to see him come in, because I think, without wanting to go into loads of depth about him, but I think as a player, I think he's one of those where he is capable of sitting in front of the back four and fulfilling that 6 role, and he's got an engine on him. He can get a bit further forward. He can cover a bit more ground. So I think he's just a little bit more well-rounded of a player, which I think is something that obviously the club have clearly been looking at in the profiles of players they've brought in. So makes a lot of sense to me, and I'd be happy to see it come off.
Is that something that tickles your taste buds, Andrew? That name, Matteo Guendouzi?
My taste buds are well and truly tickled. As Jonny said, you've got to take things with a pinch of salt around transfer windows, because there will be people just looking to fill column inches. But this one does make sense, and it passes that test of, is it believable? there'll be some people that we get linked with and you just automatically say, not a chance, because it won't fit the profile or it'll not be the type of transfer Sunderland are looking to do. But look at this lad's career. He's like so many of the players we've brought in that he's got experience at big clubs. He's played in European competitions. He's got international games under his belt. This is the type of player we're looking to sign for. And that in itself is nice. It's nice to be able to think some of these big links aren't just pie in the sky. There's every chance of it coming off. And yeah, I could see him fitting into the Sunderland setup quite easily. I think he, certainly in the past, he could be quite hot-headed, but through a desire to win. We want players who are going to graft and are desperate to succeed.
Almost reminiscent of a young Granit Xhaka, in that sense, you could say.
Very, very possibly. And they've got their connections with each other. Also, if we believe over the summer that there was some sort of links there, it is conceivable now that players who've had the chance to come to Sunderland previously have now seen what's happened in the last couple of months, and it's changed their viewpoint. Maybe in the summer it was a thanks but no thanks, whereas now it's oh yeah, I can see the steps you've taken, I can see the direction you're heading in. So I'd like Jonny, it would be one I'd be really pleased if there was a bit of substance to it.
The thing I think you've really got to hone in on here is that Labrise and Xhaka know him. So you don't need to go searching for character references if that's the type of player you're going to sign. Because I think if we went out and got him, it would be under the full knowledge that the people in leadership positions are happy that he's a good egg, basically. It's funny you talking about his attitude and stuff. There's a segment on his Wikipedia page which says Guendouzi has a hatred for losing, an attitude and mentality which he accredits his success as a professional player, although he has been accused of letting his competitive nature get the better of him. You say young Granit Xhaka, that's exactly what comes to mind, isn't it?
Letting his competitive nature get the better of him is incredible politician speak for used to love a bit of a two-footer and a red card every now and then.
Yeah, but he was very, very young when he broke through at Arsenal, wasn't he?
Well, that's what I was going to say before. When you said he's still only 26, there was a little bit of us was like, there's no way Guendouzi's only 26. And he's a little bit of that almost like Marcus Rashford syndrome where they just come onto the scene so young.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking about Rashford the other day, just because he was playing for England. Like he came in the Man United team 10 years ago, and yet he's only 27. Because you forget he was a child when he came in. Guendouzi at Arsenal to a lesser degree, but it's a similar thing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. His first season at Arsenal was 2018-19, so that was 7 years ago. But prior to that, he'd had 2 seasons in Lorient's first team. He'd played for Lorient B for 3 years. So you know what I mean. He's quite experienced for a young player, and yeah, I could definitely see us at least being open to the idea that would be a sign. I think as well, and Andrew just kind of touched on this. I think where in the summer we were very cute with our recruitment, we can afford to be picky now, and if he's available, and you know, whereas maybe in the summer we were thinking, oh, can we really afford to bring another player in of that nature? Well, now we're looking at the top 10 and we're saying, well, we can make the top 10. So now your stance has to change. All of a sudden in January, you're looking at it and going, you know, we might need these. We might need to actually go and do this to have a chance of having a really solid season.
It would be a massive statement if this one happened, because this isn't somebody for the future or somebody who's a bit of a cheap gamble. We'll see if he comes and fits in. This is a player who, as we've said there, is hitting his peak age and will want to come back to the Premier League and really see it as his time to shine. That is very different to previous transfer windows where you are desperate to bring somebody in, hoping that it saves the team. We are talking now about signing a French international whilst we're already succeeding. That would be massive. That would be a real suggestion of where the club sees itself. This isn't some lad who's got 3 or 4 relegation scraps on his CV and is going to dig us out of bother. This is a quality act who, if there is substance to it and if it does pay off, shows that we really do mean business and we're here as a top 10 club. It would be huge.
Yeah. Staying on the theme of players we were linked with in the summer, we might as well go to this one. Gonzalo Garcia. He is a player who I'd never heard of. And then all of a sudden he was banging them in for fun, wasn't he, for Real Madrid in pre-season and at the Club World Cup. It was the Club World Cup, wasn't it, where he seemed to get his chance over the summer. And yeah, he had a cracking start of the season, but doesn't seem to have been given the opportunities that he maybe thought he would have got. Which is why, perhaps they're looking at moving him along, maybe on loan or permanently. And the outlet, I'm going to butcher this again, Fichazes, I think it is. They are claiming that Sunderland are one of 3 Premier League clubs monitoring his situation, along with Aston Villa and Wolves, with the trio said to be willing to offer around 20 million euros to sign Gonzalo Garcia. Now, I don't know if there's any truth in this. None of us do, Johnny. But again, if we were genuinely interested in signing this lad in the summer, and that was when his value was at its peak in terms of, he was scoring goals, he was playing. That situation's obviously changed a little bit. So maybe it's a better time to go in and sign him. I don't know. I don't know much about the lad, if I'm honest. He hasn't played much football. But can you see us going out and spending 20 million on a striker who might not play very much, given, we've got Brobby, we've got Isidore, Mayenda's on the fringes. Is it time to chuck another one in there?
Can we just reflect yet again on the fact that you've just asked me, do you see Sunderland going and spending 20 million quid on a striker from Real Madrid who might not even get in the team? What are we doing?
Do you know the other link to that, by the way, it's just popped back into my head. I noticed he's been playing up front with Mayenda for Spain under-21s. So
maybe we've got Agent Mayenda, just a little word in his ear. This is the one where I'm really on the fence actually about it, and not even specifically about the player. I think, look, I'm like you. I don't know loads about him. I know basically what you've just rattled off there. Obviously, we all looked into him a bit when he was linked in the summer. We probably all kept a bit of an eye on him in the Club World Cup. But yeah, he was never going to nail down a spot in the starting 11 at Madrid, because they've got Mbappe, they've got Vinicius Jr., they've got a list of elite attacking talents as long as
when we get into the Champions League, we'll just sign all them, and then he can get he can get a game for Real Madrid next season, can't he?
And then we'll get Kirill's best mate Ousmane Dembele down, and we'll put the Wearside Galacticos together. But no, I think if he's at Real Madrid, he's obviously got something about him, hasn't he? And the fact that I know it's a Club World Cup, so it's not the biggest tournament in the world, but by all accounts, internally at Real Madrid, I remember reading this in the summer, they were taking it extremely seriously because they really wanted their name to be attached to, the first winners of the expanded Club World Cup. They really wanted it for the prestige as much as anything else. So the fact they were taking it seriously and he was getting games and scoring goals, they must obviously rate him. So he's clearly got some talent, but I just wonder, we already kind of had this conundrum, didn't we, at the end of the summer, but with fewer bodies, where Gue goes back to Chelsea and it's, all right, what do we do? We need a striker. Brian Brobby comes in for whatever it was in the end, 20-ish million euros, I want to say. Not sure about add-ons. So, and even at that stage, we were a bit like, well, if we were having Gue on loan to be third choice, why are we going and spending 20 million euros on the guy who comes in to replace him? Feels like 2 very different types of players and stages of development to be looked at as direct replacements for each other. And then obviously we're all very glad that it happened with hindsight, because Brobby's turned out to be quite impactful. But so this to me feels like that, but a step further, where it's a bit like, well, we already brought Brobby in on deadline day for 20 odd million, and we've got Isidore and Mayenda. Granted, different types of players and, different ages and whatnot. Mayenda in particular still developing and not nowhere near the finished article. But it does just make us question, how much do we need Garcia? And it's a question that none of us can answer, because we don't know how much of the budget is for January. We don't know what the internal priorities are. I would just wonder whether that's 20 million euros that might be better allocated somewhere else just in the immediate term. But having said all that, again, I'll go back to my first sentence. If we're signing a striker for 20 million from Real Madrid, you will not catch me saying a bad word about it. So I'll take it. I just don't necessarily see where he fits in right now. But hey, let's go for it.
It's a weird headspace to be in, Andrew, isn't it? Because we obviously we don't know, like Jonny just said, we don't know the priorities for January. We don't know, or they may be looking at it and going, this is our big chance to qualify for Europe. Let's, if we can find a better player than what we've got. Unfortunately, like someone like Mayenda might end up going out on loan if we did go and spend 20 million on another striker. But it's almost impossible for us to reckon this, isn't it? Because I'm not used to it. I sense in the summer so much. 20 million on this player, 25 million on that player, 30 million. I'm like, oh, aye, go on then. It's just like, you as a Sunderland fan, you're just not used to all these things, are you?
You're not, and I get entirely where Jonny is with regards to, like, we're signing a player from Real Madrid, get in. And then you do think, but is it the right thing, or is there space for him? I think, whereas Guendouzi would be a player who would be for the here and now, you would imagine that somebody like Gonzalo would be potentially with an eye to the future. Is this a player we could train up and get value out of him and sell him on? He might not necessarily be somebody intended to play every game, which again just sounds mad. Oh, we might sign this player from Real Madrid to lump him on the bench for the time being. But we don't know what's happening in the summer. Are there sales planned? Are we moving on one of our striking options? I don't want to see any of them go, but nothing's just done on a whim. It's all done in advance. I've had like you did there with the Guendouzi link, I've had a little look at his Wikipedia there, Gav. I'd love to know who writes these descriptions, because according to this, he is a constant threat in open play and lethal during transitions.
I think his agent wrote that.
Yeah, that sounded pretty good, that. But according to this, he's a versatile forward, which would make sense with how we do things. He's not just a centre forward. He can seemingly play further wide or as a second striker. So that then kind of answers a little bit Jonny's question about what space does he fit in, what role does he serve in the squad. Well, if this is right, he can serve a few different roles. And this is exactly the type of forward player Sunderland have been signing, or Sunderland have been interested in, are ones that can do different jobs, because Lebrist needs to be flexible in a game and change tactics as a match progresses. It might not happen, but listen, we're being linked alongside a team like Aston Villa for potential signings, and nobody's looking at that and thinking, what a load of rubbish, Sunderland have got no chance. We're in a really good position, and I never thought I'd say this over the last few years. If I was a striker being offered a potential move to the Premier League, you'd automatically write Wolves off at the time being, and it's between Sunderland and an established Aston Villa who've got Champions League experience. These are unprecedented times for us at the moment.
Where you couldn't substitute Leeds or Burnley for our name in that link, could you? No. You couldn't imagine it being Aston Villa and Burnley are after the same striker.
But Jonny, it was in the summer with some of the more tenuous ones. Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to add one little thing on. Andrew made a good point about the fact that obviously this lad, according to his Wikipedia, is a versatile forward. But the one thing I didn't mention is, I suppose, even if he comes in as a pure number 9, it could be that it means a change in role for one of the existing forward options. So somebody like a Mayenda, I've often thought that some of his best football comes when he's got the ball at his feet running at people. So could it mean a switch out wide for him? I've seen people maybe suggest Mayenda would be better playing off another striker. We've seen Isidore play wide left at times this season. Obviously, he's recently made the centre-forward position his own, but that is just something else to consider with all of these moves. Our existing players are so versatile that they can accommodate as well.
But for a fact that will be considered in all of these decisions. I honestly think in the past it was a case of, is he available? Can we afford him? And then you just drop him in the squad, say to the manager, there you go, have a gun with that lot. It's all now much more in-depth and, well, all right, if we bring this player in, is it going to bring the best out of so-and-so, or can that allow somebody else to do a different job? It's all integrated. And yeah, these deals might not come off, but reading them as we are now, they at least make sense. And you can see, if it's going to happen, you can see why the club are looking into it.
Yeah, we're now the most fashionable team in the Premier League, so we're going to be linked with everybody. I'm serious with that. I think, leading up to January and through January, you're going to see loads of links to very, very good players, just because in some cases it'll be the journalists just trying to create clicks and things like that, but in others it'll be agents trying to get good moves for players and using Sunderland's name in the conversation just to generate a bit of interest. And, you can totally see why that would be the case, because I've just said it, with a flavour of the month, aren't we? We're in every single newspaper outlet across the world. Everyone talking about how great Sunderland are. It's going to be used the same way in the transfer window. It is what it is.
I agree with that. And we'll have to be aware of that some of these links will just be people doing it for their own ends. The reason these two are intriguing and pass the sniff test on the old bullshit-ometer is that we've already been linked with them. This isn't just throwing a dart at a board and linking Sunderland with a player. You have to assume there's some substance to these. And maybe in the summer, maybe there were conversations and they were along the lines of, it's not quite right for us at the moment, but we're not completely ruling it out. So these two ones, I'm not surprised that these two ones seem to have had a bit of life breathed back into them. It's more than just a bit of transfer tittle-tattle.
Yeah. The third name on our list today, and the final one, is a player I've never heard of, so I can't claim to be an expert. Santiago Jimenez, who plays for AC Milan. Calcio Mercato are claiming that Sunderland and Brentford have inquired regarding a potential move for him. They're open to him leaving, either on loan or permanently, as long as they can find a replacement. But despite Premier League interest, he remains determined to basically stay at Milan and succeed, and doesn't plan on moving anywhere. But a name I've not heard, Jonny, I don't know if you're familiar with him. Santiago Jimenez, I was just looking at his record. 24-year-old, started his career with Cruz Azul in Mexico and scored a lot of goals for them. Then got a big move to Feyenoord, where he banged them in for fun for a few seasons. And then in the summer or January window, I can't work out which one, just his 2025. Loads of prep work being done here, by the way. February it was. So January of this year, he signed for AC Milan from Feyenoord and did so for a big fee, 32 million euros. Doesn't look like it's went to plan entirely. Scored only one goal this season, played a bit part role. Did score 6 last season, but still not scored at the rate that he did at his 2 clubs previous to that. But again, a new name that we've been linked with. And I think it's interesting to me, at least anyway, is that of the names on our list here, 2 of them are strikers. So when we're talking about maybe bringing in a centre forward, could there be something in that? Could there be something in Sunderland signing the striker? Remains to be seen. But again, not someone I've ever really heard of. I don't know if you're a frequent watcher of AC Milan and you've heard of this guy or not.
I could pretend I am and try and get some more credibility with the listeners, but no.
No.
I've just done the old Wikipedia trick. I've got it open in front of us right now. This is my bank of knowledge on this player. But the first thing that sticks out about him is, if you could sort of generate a player's career history to make them look like the kind of player Sunderland would sign, this guy is like, if you'd ask Christian Speakman or whoever, like, make up a player that sounds like we'd be after them, it's him. Even the name Santiago Jimenez, it's a bit like, all right, it's all a bit too convenient, this, but young lad from a different continent, comes over to Europe, has some success, a big move that's not working out too well, still young enough to improve. Like, you're just ticking box after box. The big thing that gives us pause on this one is, you said 32 million euros, whatever the exact fee is. He's only just gone there for big money, and he's still only 24. And with the general financial health of Italian football not being the best at the moment, And we already mentioned Lazio potentially having financial issues earlier in the pod. I would be wary of reports linking us to him because I don't see us spending that level of money on a striker who's currently floundering mid-season. And I know that you've just, we kind of talked about how, it's 20 million on him and 30 million on him and, money's flying around everywhere. But I just, something about it, just like Andrew said about the bullshit-ometer, something about this just doesn't quite pass it for me. Now, that could just be because we haven't heard of him before and the other two we were linked with in the summer, so it could just be familiarity. But, yeah, and this lad seems like much more of just a straight-up number 9. He's more than 6 foot tall. He's clearly like a leads the line type of player, which, without that extra facet of the versatility which Garcia had mentioned, in which even players like, the Armand Lorient deal, which ended up not happening in the summer. I know he's primarily a wide forward, but he was another one with versatility, could play through the middle if needed, could play on the other side. I think that's clearly something the club they've really made a conscious effort. And it's not just in attack. You've seen it in all positions. The signings of the likes of Mukiele and Getrauda, who are, I was going to say they're utility men. They're not, because that's almost a derogatory term, but you know what I mean? They've got versatility is a key attribute that they've got. And so I think that obviously is being a target. And I think this lad, he doesn't quite have that. He's just moved for big money. I wouldn't be shocked to see us in for a player like this, because like I say, the sort of general profile seems to be pretty much what we're after. But yeah, I'd be surprised if this goes anywhere further than paper talk.
Yes, and if we're looking for a tenuous link, it's he played for Feyenoord with Lucharel Getrauda. So there we go. If we're looking for, you might have a mate in the squad if he was a potential signing. But yes, we'll move swiftly past this one. We'll go for a quick ad break, and then we'll come back and chat a little bit about the international window and Leigh Camp. Can't wait to get into that one.
The Who's Down and Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like needing the protection of an offensive guard on the football field, but getting an elementary school crossing guard. Sure, they're both guards, but you can only trust one to keep your quarterback safe when the game is on the line. So don't settle for just any insurance when there's State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hello, I'm Diane Morgan. If you know who I am, you know who I am. If you don't, who cares? I'm here to explain Italian Time, a holiday phenomenon where Italians throw away their clocks and gather for eternity with San Pellegrino. I've been at this party so long that I've eaten 5 courses, hugged someone's grandma twice, and been offered a job in the family restaurant. So this holiday season, make sure to bring enough San Pellegrino to last you through the meal, the after meal, and the entire goodbye ritual. San Pellegrino, holiday on Italian Time.
Welcome back to How We're the Podcast. And just before the break, I mentioned we would chat a little bit about the international break. Now, this is on the proviso that you all understand we're recording this before there are some games played. So we might be slightly out of date, but we'll try our best to cover things off. Tonight, there are a lot of games in which our players are playing in. Going through my list here, I've got Bertrand Traore playing against Benin. Chemson Talbi, if he gets on the pitch, has a friendly with Uganda. Eliza Mayenda has a game against Romania under 21. So there's a bunch of players who've got games on Tuesday night. But it's been a busy few days internationally, hasn't it, Johnny? I don't know if you've been keeping an eye on things. Probably the big story I would say would be that Noah Siddiqui and Arthur Masuaku both played 120 minutes, which just filled me with dread when I read that, for DR Congo, as they went all the way to penalties against Nigeria before winning 4-3. Noah Siddiqui scored a penalty. He also scored a goal, I think, which was then disallowed by, I want to say, VAR. And I would need to make sure of that. But yeah, he did score, which for him is uncharacteristic. He then scored a penalty later in the game in the shootout. The big one for me, and I don't know if you saw the clip of this, but was the was the Nigeria goal, which came from Arthur Masuaku giving the ball away in the most lazy fashion I've ever seen. It just backheeled it straight to a Nigeria player who then scored. But what that means is because they've won, they will go into a playoff against teams from other continents, which will take place in around March, I think, for a place in the World Cup, which obviously will land somewhere around the Premier League games. So we've got that to consider. But that was the big story, wasn't it? That those two had gone all the way in such an important game for their country. We haven't heard any different. We think they're okay. We think they're fit and firing. But yeah, I don't know were you the same as me when you saw that Siddiqui had played that amount of football?
Every time I see Siddiqui play for Congo at all, I'm like, any danger the manager just takes him off after 5 minutes. Fancy just doing us a favour. It's good that he's seemingly come through it, because as much as we don't want to see our players flogged into the ground, again, we sort of touched on this in the AFCON pod, but it's a great experience for Siddiqui still to play in. And I think this is something that's difficult for England fans in particular to really get our heads round, because to us, qualifiers, whether it's for the Euros or for the World Cup, are essentially, 2008 aside, like just a box ticking exercise. I mean, look at this World Cup qualifying campaign where we've won all 8 games. Did we even concede a goal? I'm not sure. It was so laughably easy to qualify that I don't think we appreciate that for the smaller countries where qualification is very much a live thing. This international break in particular is a big one. Across the world.
Look at how the Republic of Ireland game went with Troy Parrott scoring in the last kick of the game.
Exactly.
And that was their lifeline. That's them. They've still got a chance, kind of thing.
Yeah, and how much Ireland still hold on to the cherry on Ray handball. Because it stopped them going to a tournament like these. These things are enormous occasions for these type of countries. So for Siddiqui, and obviously Masuaku, but to a much lesser degree, but for Siddiqui to have played the full 120 in that and scored a penalty in what would have been a very pressurised situation, it's a great experience for him. That will benefit him and us in the longer term. Masuaku, maybe he's just been watching highlights of Michael Turner taking that free kick at Anfield, that Fernando Torres scored off. Maybe
we can't blame Michael Turner for Arthur Masuaku in 2025. Sorry.
I tried my best, Arthur. I've tried to back you up, lad. Less said about that, the better. But yeah, no, I think it's good experience for Siddiqui in particular, and I think I'm not 100% sure if I'm right here, but I think these qualifiers that they go into happen in the international break, and that already happens in March. Andrew's nodding and thumbs up on us, so I feel safe now. But hopefully that at least means that it's less ideal that when he goes to that international break, it'll be for high-intensity competitive games because it's going to be right at the business end of the season. But because it's just in a standard international break, hopefully he's not going to miss any extra Sunderland games or anything like that, because I believe that international window starts immediately following the derby.
Does, you're right, yeah.
So, yeah, as long as he doesn't have to go any earlier, then, as long as he's still here for the derby, that's the main thing.
There's not a chance the club would allow him to just go to an international game when we're playing Newcastle away. Not a chance. No chance. So as long as which it shouldn't, but as long as it doesn't impact that, then the only other concern is going to be, like I say, it's not just the fact that it's going away for internationals. Again, that to them will be like a make or break, life or death game or 2 games. I'm not sure whether they have to win 2 games to get through, but whatever the exact format of that is, it's going to be probably more intense in some ways than the league games that he's playing either side, barring the derby, of course. So, I mean, it's great to see him doing well, though, and it's nice to see Sunderland players actually demonstrating they can score penalties after the absolute embarrassment that was last season. So, more of that, please, lads. Yeah. It's been a busy international window, as I said, Andrew. We've had quite a lot of players away. I mean, we'll not go into each game individually, but I did see Granit Xhaka scored a penalty against Sweden for Switzerland. They've all but qualified for the World Cup. They won 4-1. Chris Rigg, captained England under-19s against Latvia, and also scored. Omar Alderete got himself sent off despite not actually being on the pitch, which I thought was quite fun. Did you see that one? Where he swung a little punch at someone.
If people are listening to this, these episodes might be out of sync. I only heard about this earlier today, talking to Martin and Ant. Apparently, yeah, it was a bit of a Royal Rumble on the touchline. Is that right, lads?
Heine weight about. That's exactly what you expect from Sunderland playing 2025, isn't it? We're the big lads now.
That concussion must have done a real number on him, like, because he still seems to be a bit confused. Thought he was in a boxing ring.
Yeah, woke up and thinks he's Mike Tyson. But
you wouldn't want a clip of him, would you? Like, you'd know about it.
Speaking about concussion, you'd have one then.
Yes, but in other players, Andrew Lutherell Getroidas back in the Netherlands team, which is good news. Bertrand Traoré, captain Burkina Faso in their game against Niger. We've got Talbi away, who's not been getting a game with Morocco. Eliza Mayanda, as I mentioned, started for Spain against San Marino, played 45 minutes. Ballard and Hume both playing for Northern Ireland. Of course, Ballard is now banned because he also got sent off for a really soft second yellow. But the one I want to talk about is Ronaldo, because he didn't play that first game against Mozambique. Now, we're recording this before Mozambique play again on Monday evening. So with the fullness of time, we might hear about it. But it kind of comes back to something that Jonny said about Siddiqui. You see one of your players get injured on national duty and you just go, oh, no. Like, it could be really innocuous. It could just be like, he just needs a rest, you know. But we don't, because he plays for bloody Mozambique and you don't hear nothing out of the place. We've got to kind of wait till he's back on home soil. We're probably going to have to wait until probably Thursday to hear from Reggie Slabreese what the crack is when he does his press conference. And it's just that feeling of dread, isn't it? Like, these players are just so important to us.
They are important to us, but it's one of them. You have to take the rough with the smooth. If you're wanting to compete, you've got to sign players who are good enough to be getting called up for their country. And you referred to Hertrude there. I think he'd been out of the international picture for a while.
Yeah.
So other players will look at that and think, oh, well, here's a lad who's gone to Sunderland, started getting a few games, and now he's back on the international scene. I fancy that. I want to represent my country. So we're getting a reputation as a club where top international players play and are being noticed. None of this Darren Bent having to put in a transfer request because he thinks it's the only chance he's going to get a call up for England. So, yeah, it's a bit of a shame that there's this doubt over him. And like you say, we'll probably not know until the back end of the week the full story. You just have to take it. And as you two gents are talking there, I can't wipe the smile off my face. In what world did we envisage Sunderland fans having to keep an eye on how Uganda or Mozambique are doing? Or before the break, Gav, we spoke about transfer links with a player from Real Madrid, AC Milan, and where's Guendouzi? Is it Roma or Lazio?
Lazio, yeah.
So we're talking about huge names and players who were playing on the world stage. Xhaka, like you say, scored a penalty. I remember a few people saying in the summer, oh, have his legs gone? Or is he just going to be coming here to pick up a wage packet? There was never any doubt about that because the World Cup to him and representing Switzerland's massive. So he is going to see this season as huge for him, and he wants to be going into that World Cup next summer flying. So yeah, we might every now and again lose somebody because they're on international duty. It's better than having a load of players that aren't getting called up and are just sitting around. And it's just as likely to have happened in training at the Academy of Light. One thing I would just say, if you don't mind, gents, you know that Jimenez fella we were linked with, and Jonny said he wasn't quite sure if there was any substance to that. As you were talking, he's another one with international experience, but it's for Mexico. I wonder if that's just one of those stories because we're Flavour of the Month in Mexico at the moment and we're getting a lot of social media attention. Is that one of those where you just chuck that out to get a few extra clicks.
I'll probably get about 700,000 extra clicks the way the Mexicans have got on social media, won't it?
To be fair, the club are very aware of that link.
They've leaned into it very well, haven't they?
They have. There's been a didn't we release like some merch via who's the company who we use for the club shop? Fanatics. Yeah, so they've got like a Mexican store. So the club have released all these shirts out there, and there's been a lot of social media stuff about that. You wouldn't put it past them to be like, hey, there's probably not a better time to bloody sign a Mexican player if there's one available who's right for us. You know what I mean?
But again, though, you've been doing podcasts, lads, a lot longer than me. There was a few years ago when you two talking, you wouldn't have dreamt about saying, we've got X amount of players on international duty. We're selling however many shirts in Mexico. Every time I sit down and do a pod, it just makes me think we're in the right shape. We're going the right way. Ronaldo, I hope there's no problems there, because I really like Ronaldo. I think he's played really well for us, and it would be brilliant if he's fit and able to play against Fulham.
Yeah, and of course, if he isn't, which again, by the time this pod goes out, we might know more about it. But if he isn't, we've got Dennis Cirkin on the comeback trail, haven't we? So you've got good players still in backup. I know Ronaldo is top tier, but Dennis Cirkin was one of the players who was pushing to be in the conversation for is he a Premier League player or not. So there's options and opportunities there for others. And that's going to happen loads this season. We can't expect all these players to stay fit. It's just every time there's an international break, you worry about these things. But there's not going to be another one till March. So there we go. Anyways, moving swiftly along to someone I never thought I'd talk about again unless it was on a top 10, talking about shit players or something like that. Lee Camp is... even saying that name makes me shudder, to be honest. Andrew's being violently sick into the bin. Johnny's tearing his hair out and crying. People right across Wearside are switching off their podcasts.
There's just been a mass electricity usage drop as everyone turns off the computers and phones.
Yeah, I'm going to ask for the stats off Spotify after this to see how many people tuned out at the mere mention of the name. Yeah, somebody who I'm rubbing my head now as I talk about him.
I wish this was a video podcast just for the sight of Gav. His head honestly just dropped straight in his hand there.
Lee Camp, for some reason, was asked about Sunderland this week. And to be fair to him, I would rather people go and listen to this. The clip is out there on social media. If you want to go find the actual podcast, I think it's only a tiny segment on it, but Second Tier Podcast did an interview with Lee Camp, and he chatted about his time at Sunderland, and the gist of it basically was, I kind of understand why they all hated us, because I was shit. At least he hasn't come out and blamed everybody else. He did kind of blame the club and the state it was in. He said, it was only going one way. Everybody there was a bit arrogant about the fact they were in the Championship and they weren't facing up to reality. He was very humble about the reasons why it went wrong at Sunderland. Like I say, I urge everybody to go out and listen to it. But just to come to you on it, Johnny, I mean, you'll have seen the clip, you've heard the clip. He talked about how he kind of just felt like he couldn't turn down the opportunity to sign for a club like Sunderland. Then when he was at the stadium, he was like, shit, this is a big club. And he played for a lot of clubs over his career, had ups and downs right throughout, probably more ups than he did downs, to be fair to him. I think, there are probably fans of clubs he played for who loved Lee Camp, but for Sunderland, he was for me, he's the worst goalkeeper we've ever had, in my opinion. But still, it's just, you hear that name, Lee Camp, and something, again, as Andrew's just kind of touched on before, it's just a reminder of how far we've come, isn't it? Like, Lee Camp, worst player I've ever probably seen between the sticks at Sunderland. But nice to hear him talk with a bit of humility, at least, about his time at the club. And it's taken how many years? Bloody 7-8 years for him to do it. And he's waited right until, I'm not saying he's just come out to talk about Sunderland specifically, but right when we're at our peak and we're over those years that he was involved in, there's Lee Camp to talk about Sunderland,
Yeah, just to dredge it all back up again. First thing I want to say is my favourite Lee Camp story, and by favourite I mean it gives me nightmares, is I can't remember what game it was, but I remember one of the home games that season. I was at the game, and for some reason I was there dead early. Don't normally get in the ground until about 10, 15 minutes before kick-off at the earliest. But I was in early enough to watch the warm-ups. And, they had they have obviously the main goals, but they had like an extra goal off to one side where they were just doing a bit shooting practice. And it was literally just one of the coaches, one football, and Camp, and probably Jason Steele. Whoever the other was. I know, just to make it even better. And honestly, the coach was just doing, like he had the ball in his hands and he would just drop it. And on the half volley, he would just knock one at the keepers, not put much power behind it, a little bit to one side, a little bit to the other. Lee Camp didn't save a single one the whole time. The entire warm-up, he conceded every shot that the coach was trying to let him save. And if that doesn't sum up his time at Sunderland, I can't tell you what does. In terms of the actual interview, you're right. He was very humble about it. He didn't play like I was too good for what was going on, or, I hate them because they hated me. I think you could tell that he's recognised that, look, it went wrong. I wasn't good enough. The club wasn't good enough. And he did make specific mention of how good the fans are. And he kind of said, he was talking about how everyone, when he was talking about the hangover at the club from the Premier League, he made clear that he sort of didn't mean the fans. He was like, the fans deserved a lot better than what happened. But internally, everybody was completely just going the wrong way. So I thought that was kind of fair enough. There were two things about it, though, that slightly rubbed us up the wrong way. The first is, he essentially blames the fact that he wasn't fit yet, and he was still carrying, because I think he'd had a bad knee injury, hadn't he, just before he came to, well, I'm saying just before, probably a year or so before he came to us. I think he was still recovering from.
I think he played like he had a bad knee. So
well, yeah. And he kind of says like, well, I knew even when I was considering the move that I wasn't really up to it, but I went anyway. And I'm a bit like, well, if you knew you weren't up to it, shouldn't you have mentioned that at the time to the club that was signing you and paying your wages, that you're not actually at the standard that's required? And I get it. And he even says, like, sort of your ego takes over. And I imagine all professional footballers and athletes in general are ego-driven maniacs to some degree, because you have to be to believe in yourself enough to make it to the top or near top level of anything. So I'm not surprised by it. But yeah, I was a little bit like, well, it's all well and good saying, oh, why my knee was knackered 7 years later. If you knew that in advance, you probably should have told us so we didn't sign you. But leaving that to one side, the other thing was like, yeah, I suppose he's right to mention the fact that the club was a total mess and rotten to the core and everything else that he says, that, like, we can't be hypocrites and us all sit there and say that about the club and then act pissy if a player who was in the club also says, yeah, no, everyone was right, by the way, it was a complete mess. But he also went out of his way to defend Jack Rodwell. And I thought, that's a little bit tone deaf, because I understand from a professional footballer's point of view why they might look at some of the stick Rodwell got, particularly because he got a lot of jip about his injuries. And from our point of view, how maybe they weren't always necessarily what he was playing them up to be at the time, being the main concern. But I can understand how that might look a bit like the fans getting on his back because, well, we signed him for 10 million quid and he's on a load of money and he's always injured. That wasn't that, there was a hell of a lot more to the Jack Rodwell story than I think a lot of people give it credit for, particularly either people from the outside or people like a Lee Camp, who he wasn't there in the Premier League relegation season. He wasn't there for a lot of the build-up that made the bad feeling be there between us as a fan base and Rodwell. So, like I say, these are just minor things. It does just rub us up a bit, like, and I get it because we care about Sunderland and he just doesn't, like, as much as we all live under the delusion that players care about all the clubs they play for. As you said before, Gav, Lee Camp has had a hell of a lot of clubs. He was at Sunderland for, half a season, was essentially injured the whole time he was playing, was crap, and we got relegated. So I'd be surprised if he had anything other than utter disdain for us. But yeah, there was those couple of moments where I was just a bit like, it's a bit like, like if somebody does something bad to you and then apologises and everything, but then they just like make a comment where you're like, but I can tell you just don't get why that was, why I was fuming in the first place. You obviously haven't, you know what I mean? It was that sort of feeling. It was like, he's sort of saying all the right things, but I can tell he doesn't actually really get it. But having said that, like I say, he was only here half a season, so I haven't got any ill will towards the bloke anymore. I did in 2018. I had quite a substantial amount of ill will towards him. But I think it is one of those where, in the fullness of time, seeing where the club got to and where it is now, you do have to sort of be like, well, he is just right, isn't he? He said the club was rotten. He was right. He said that we probably needed the relegations to reset and get to rock bottom before we could rebuild. And again, I'd be a hypocrite to say anything other than he's right, because I think I've made that exact point on a couple of these pods before where, you look at the way that we ripped everything out and started again. We wouldn't be where we are now if we hadn't done that. So it's a period of the club's history that, maybe we don't want it brought up all the time if we can help it. But I suppose it's sort of the perfect timing, isn't it? Where we're good enough now that we don't have to care about that. So we can have that little catharsis of, oh yeah, Lee Camp, I expel him from my mind now. He's gone. I never have to think about him again, and long may that continue.
I just want to check you're all right, Andrew, because Jonny also brought up Jack Rodwell there, and it was completely unprovoked. He didn't need to do it. So Jason Steele, Jack Rodwell, Lee Camp, are you feeling all right?
I brought that up because if I had to listen to the clip, you've got to think about Jack Rodwell.
I was much happier when we were talking about links to players from Real Madrid. I must admit. I mean, I didn't see the bit about Rodwell. I didn't actually watch the clip. I just saw the transcript.
It's honestly just an offhand little mention. He just mentions like, oh, and they were having a go at Jack Rodwell, and then moves on.
Well, I think though it reminds me that Lee's lads are human though, and that maybe he saw Rodwell as a mate and he just wants to stick up for his mate. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know whether he actually wanted to go into the Rodwell thing or it cropped up. Certainly from the transcript I read, I actually thought he went up a little bit in my estimation. You'll know better about the tone in which he spoke in. But he is a human being. He is a bloke who we forget, don't we? We all criticise these people and they should be better, they should do this, they should do that. He's got his own life and his own considerations to make. You said, Gav, earlier he played like he had a knee injury. For me, he played as if he had no knees. He was bad. He was dreadful. Yeah, he was dreadful. But I kind of feel a little bit bad about making a cheap gag like that because, I wouldn't like it if he started criticising my work. So the fact that he spoke about us meant he went up a little bit in our estimation. He wasn't looking to pass the buck or point the finger at the fans or whatever. He accepts a little bit of culpability. I think as well though, the whole story just stinks of desperation because apparently was it Andy Lonergan? Yeah, and it fell through. Yeah. So the club are just scrabbling around, panicking. Apparently he was due to play for the under-21s and then ends up signing for Sunderland to play in the Championship. That's as much Sunderland's fault as anybody else. They didn't have any sort of contingencies in place for this other deal if that had not worked out.
Yeah, and I was thinking exactly this when you mentioned earlier in this episode something about, how meticulously planned all of our transfers are these days, whereas it felt in the old days like it was a lot more of, well, can we afford him? And will he come? And it brought exactly that bit of the Lee Camp interview to mind because, as you say, that is the prime example where it was, I can't imagine Andy Lonergan was top of anyone's list at the time either. No offence to the bloke, but he's, if you're struggling and you're desperate for somebody to improve you, he's probably not the first name on the list. And then when even he's turned them down, they've clearly gone, who will actually come and who's available and who can we afford? And Lee Camp's happened to fall into those categories.
And sorry, Gal, I was just going to say, at no point in that consideration is the word fitness.
Or even ability.
Yeah. We spoke. Go on, Gav. Sorry, mate.
No, I was going to say that kind of summed up the business in that window because Ashley Fletcher was the same. We just signed players because no other options were available, and it was it was desperate. That's how we end up with the shit that we did. Mark Wilson as well, did he sign in that window?
He joined at the start of the season.
Yeah, he was the summer.
We spoke about camp a bit on this week's On This Week podcast, and I have got no time for League camp as a player. The fact that he said what he said, I'm willing to listen to him. But yeah, just thinking about League camp and talking about it on this week, and you've mentioned Mark Wilson there. Just what a catastrophic season that was. It's completely different club to what we started talking about at the start of this pod.
We've I think we've used up our quarter of mentions of League camp this week on How We're the Podcast. That's enough. No more. He did say, by the way, he did say that the club was beyond saving. Like Superman couldn't have saved that. Superman did save it. Louis Dreyfus appeared, and that was that. But perhaps at the time he was there, maybe not.
I just want to say as well, I loved the phrase that Andrew used, on this week. Which, if you're not familiar with the pod titles, that seems like a gibberish sentence, but in context, perfect.
Yes. Well, like I say, I think we've spoken more than enough this week about Lee Camp, of course, because it might be a nice guy in real life, but he was just awful to watch, and I don't want to ever have to watch anybody as bad as that ever again play for Sunderland. I do feel a little bit better though, having kind of just spoke about him. It's been a bit like therapy, I guess. We kind of, we've maybe there was some hidden trauma there, and we've kind of we got rid of that by chatting about him a little bit and remind ourselves how good everything is. Because as Andrew said, we're being linked with players from Real Madrid now and not Cardiff's third choice goalkeeper. So there's been worse moments definitely in Sunderland's time. Anyways, I think considering in the build up to today's pod, we weren't quite sure what we were going to talk about. To have done an hour is pretty remarkable, really. So if you've made it this far, you've made it through the chat about Lee Camp and Jack Rodwell and Jason Steele, and well done. Thank you for joining us this week. There is, of course, loads to catch up on. Because there's been an international break, we've had to be a little bit creative with the pods. So on Monday, as Andrew mentioned before, we had On This Week. We had the 2-part Room 101, which you guys took part in, which I thought was brilliant. You two going head-to-head and with your pet hates in football. People can get in touch with theirs, and maybe we might use them in future episodes. There's also the deep dive that me and you did, Jonny, on the African Cup of Nations, which I think, I will say this, but it's definitely worth a listen, because anybody who's aware of the fact this is coming up, there might be a lot in that pod that you weren't already aware of. There was a chat with Keith Downey last week. There was a 2-part Q&A. There's loads to catch up on, absolutely loads to catch up on, so make sure, if you haven't already, get caught up on all the pods. We've got plenty coming this week, which I'm sure you'll hear from us a few more times leading up to that Fulham game. Can't wait for that one. The return of proper footy, of course. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much, Jonny. Been a pleasure, mate.
Yep, thank you very much. And Robin Router, just to complete the set.
Oh, no. He was all right. Anyways, that's enough. Andrew, thank you, mate.
Thank you. It's been class. And to counteract Robin Router, Robin Roofs. There you go. We'll end on a positive.
Very nice.
And cheers to listeners. Thank you very much. We'll catch you tomorrow.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Find the biggest voices in sport on the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Like Not the Top 20 podcast with me, George Elliott.
And me, Ali Maxwell.
Join us on our podcast about the best football leagues in the world, the EFL. Want football to be like it was back in the day? No VAR and so much drama. Search Not the Top 20 and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.